How's everybody doing? All right. I'm going to complain to the conference coordinators. I saw those big pretzels that they were giving out. So if you guys start falling asleep, I might have some extra pretzels up here. So you got to pay attention. Also, there's usually $5 in one of the chairs up here up front. I see that nobody actually wants that today. So welcome. My name is Tim Sanage. I'm a senior security partner strategist. What that means is I manage a lot of our partners within the AWS ecosystem. But my background is also I came from the security and compliance team here in AWS, so I actually help get us through our FedRAMP packages and a lot of our other certifications and accreditations. So what we're here today is talk about kind of DFARS. How many people are subject to DFARS or want to know about DFARS? Love DFARS, right? Anybody? All right. Anybody in our workshop yesterday? We did a 4-hour workshop yesterday on DFARS. Anybody there? Okay, good. You won't have to hear the same jokes that I did yesterday. So kind of the basics is, one of the things that's really been hitting the market right now is really the education and the aerospace contracting, areas is really subject to this. And so we've actually seen a big uptick in, organizations saying, wow, there's a mandate that I've got to meet at the end of the year. And so we're starting to see a massive uptick. And so, but the reality is that because of our FedRAMP capability and our alignment with FSMA and 853, Rev 4, AWS is very well situated to be able to help out in these types of workloads because you have, all of that capability and all that system and services set up within the cloud that you can actually build a DFARS compliant environment much quicker with more transparency and more availability than you maybe could on-prem. But a couple of other things that we also have, a lot of people ask us the question about, well, what about the incident response piece? Again, another leverage point within AWS is obviously we've got a FedRAMP moderate in our east-west, a FedRAMP moderate in our GovCloud, and a FedRAMP high. And we've got to meet the intent of NIST 861 as well as the US CERT requirements of 24 hours of reporting of a known incident. And so obviously we can help and support this with the customers because one of the things that comes up a lot is customers think, well, it's an incident, so AWS must be responsible to help me respond to it. And in a lot of cases, we do help you, but a lot of cases, we find out it's an incident in the customer account. And so, yes, we can help and identify, yes, sorry, customer actually left SSH wide open to the world, and you had a breach. We can help you mitigate that, but that's still an incident that's reportable to you. So those are the pieces. If it's a DDoS, if it's against the entire infrastructure within AWS, that then becomes an instance reportable to us, and then we also notify the customers, and we can meet those intents of this regulation. So that's, again, a few misnomers or a few clarifications that, that we've been working with customers on this to make sure that they can, really meet the intent. But the nice thing about this, as I said, we're really good at being able to identify how to meet and remediate these types of controls because it's really based on 853, which is, a moderate. It's like, I don't know, what is it, 325, something like that around controls. Well, DFARS or 171 is actually 109 controls. So it's actually, a much less effort from the standpoint of doing a full FedRAMP, but it still has a lot of the elements that you really need to, work on from a technology standpoint. It really focuses a lot on access management, really focuses a lot on identity and access management. Obviously auditing, and a lot of the system communications and system integrity controls are really the heavy lift within this framework. But we've set up a program to where we can really break this down and identify, as you can see here, we worked with an organization called Allgrass, it's a partner of ours, to actually map the different control elements to services, both in AWS, as well in consulting services, and as well as in marketplace services. So as you can see up here, I've got 18 controls that you as a customer, if you move to AWS, you automatically inherit. And these are really the data center elements, physical, security, environmental, maintenance type controls. These are things that you just consume, so it becomes a lighter lift for you as an organization. And then we've got about 70 shared controls, and that really means I'm doing, or AWS is doing something below the hypervisor, and you need to do a separate implementation or risk treatment above the hypervisor. But the two treatments that we do below and above complement each other. So if I'm doing access control below, you're doing it above, you've got a complete picture of how access control meets the intent of the framework. And then you've got the operational controls, and this is really where we have consulting partners or we have other organizations that we work with that can help you work through some of these operational procedures, and we've mapped those out, about 56. But what's really compelling is the 81 controls that are mapped out to different partner solutions that we work with, like Splunk or CloudCheckr or Okta and so forth. And they've already went through this mapping in this tool to identify how do their services and systems, meet the intent of these controls and help you, treat them. So we've got a really good picture on how you can go forward and meet the intent of this. How do we do this? And so that's kind of one of the pieces that we've developed over the last couple of years. How many people have heard of security by design? So this is a concept that we developed a couple of years ago, and really this was in response to the DevOps implementation. How many people have DevOps shops in their organizations right now or run IE DevOps? DevOps is a great process. It's great to have that, in place, but the problem is a lot of times you get a lot of CI/CD life cycles that are forgetting about security. And so that's what this is about, is how do we bake security into that DevOps life cycle and make sure in the continuous delivery and continuous integration that we also have a continuous risk treatment. We have something that's treating risk before it gets deployed. So a lot of these principles and processes are things that we've actually deployed within this DFARS ecosystem. And so as I talked about, some of the highlights, these are some of the services both in AWS as well as in third-party marketplace offerings that, have also been mapped to be able to help, suffice this. So we've been working with one of our partners that's actually building out a DFARS compliant environment that we're going to bring up here in a second, but this is one of the sample, configurations that we've set up. When you look at the NIST control of 3.3.9, it's really talking about limiting management of audit functions. And this is an example of, leveraging one of our services, which is a, identity and access management policy, to create a deny policy for your developers, but then create an allow policy for read and get. And so you can have separate, not only are you meeting the intent of the control, you're also setting up separation of duties, which is, again, a positive security approach to say, okay, I can allow my developers to read and get information, but I'm not allowing them to start and stop logging, so I can make sure that I can keep track of what's going on in my environment. And we've got quite a few of these, layouts and so forth in the tool that we talked about, and we can give you a link at the end of the presentation to look at more in depth. But with that, I'd like to bring up Robert and turn it over to their journey of how they've worked through this.
Thank you, sir. Robert Doherty, Chief Information Security Officer for Commum Advanced Electronic Solutions. This is Lori Crooks. She's our lead governance, risk, and compliance person. Golly, I probably should get your title correct. And just to share a little bit of our story and how we've come to start running our operations within AWS GovCloud. So the security landscape, this is not going to be entirely on security, but it's been pretty tough. You've seen all the headlines, seen all the news here recently, and somebody asked me, what's it like being in this industry now? And I was trying to contemplate that the other day, and looking at the kind of the dark bags under my eyes, and realized I'm staying up pretty late at night and eating a lot of junk, getting a little pudgy, and I realized I suddenly identify as a trash panda now. So, but thankfully my wife thinks we're both still cute. All right, so what's our mission? We have a little bit different approach when it comes to information security. Background on the team, we really treat it as a kind of a counter cyber intelligence approach. So what does this mean? We're looking both on the outside and the inside proactively. We're looking for insider threat on the outside, foreign intelligence entities and organizations that are out to steal our proprietary information, and the normal drive-by stuff as well. We're also tasked with maintaining the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our systems, and also providing subject matter expertise in a wide range of subjects, including compliance, which this is a big part of it. All right, so I want to keep these couple things in mind when we go through this presentation, because these are important. We'll come back to them at the end. So our approach is people are always more important than tools or systems. Quality is always better than quantity. Skilled information security professionals cannot be mass-produced. Competent InfoSec professionals cannot be created during an emergency. Simple solutions are inherently more secure than complex solutions. And plan, train, and test for failure, you will be breached. So the threat landscape. Like I said, it's pretty ugly. Statistics up to date, and I just came over from the Gartner CISO conference, they're saying about 99 days now on average for North American companies to realize that they've been breached. Globally, it's anywhere from 6 to 8 months before you realize you have a problem. 87% of the time, it's by a customer or somebody in your supply chain that notifies that you have a problem, or another, like a law enforcement entity or the US federal government. And if you're an organization with more than 5,000 endpoints, there's a 90% likelihood that you are breached right now and you do not know it. So it's pretty sobering. Spectacular breaches over the past couple of years. Won't go into all of these, but if you've been paying attention to the news, not only hit to reputation, but huge, significant impact to bottom line for some of these companies. And then for some federal organizations, especially the OPM, if you've ever had a security clearance, you've ever filled out an SF-86, the foreign intelligence entities, have literally a treasure trove of information to be mining for the next several decades. So on our side, defense industry, it's been really bad. Last year, a gentleman, a foreign national named Sue Ben, we like to refer to him as Sue Ben Stealing. That's another joke. You guys have got to catch up now. Come on. All right, so worked for several years with 2 unidentified Chinese nationals, 2 defense companies. Over the course of that time period, they stole 50 terabytes of unclassified information, the equivalent of 5 libraries of Congress. All of it unclassified, but it was all related to classified portions of those platforms that you see on the screen. So we're very aware that the systems that we produce are targeted literally on a daily basis. We see this almost monthly, and some of the things we've had to deal with over the course of the last 19 months, and it just seems to be getting worse both in scale and in scope. So as we look at all this, early last year when I took over the InfoSec organization at Commum, really need to kind of rethink our approach on how we were doing our jobs and how we were protecting the company. And as most organizations, it's really this. There's even a very well-known vendor right now that's using kind of a slogan, be a knight of the IT realm or security realm. And what's wrong with that picture? Is the knight very agile? Are they very fast? Can they adapt? If you think about it, all the tools that they have available are proprietary. It's very difficult, time-consuming to pick up a new tool and learn it. And again, they're not very fast. They're not very, very agile. And where do they sit? Usually behind high walls. So that's the way most organizations kind of see themselves. They put this very, lots of defense in depth, invest very heavily in firewall and IDS, IPS, intrusion detection, malware, antivirus. Some are even going so far as to buy and purchase deception technologies and things of that nature. The problem with all of this is it's failing, and it's failing miserably. We say we've got a different approach. So this is what my team, we think of, it's much more adaptable. Yes, the creature is extinct, but we're using the Jurassic Park version, so genetically engineered to be an extremely efficient hunter. So adaptable, very quick, very fast to learn, picks up new tools, tries them out. If they don't work, drop them and go on to something else. So we have past versus today. Uh-oh. Yep, there we go. And as you see, in the past, very generic approach, shotgun approach, the mindset of we can stop everything. Then everything was really signature rule-based, as we saw even recently with the WannaCry. And there's one breaking today, by the way. The criminal organization is known as what is it, Randy? The Dark Overlords, I think, are now actually holding several news agencies and broadcast networks for ransom right now. So we've moved over to, again, the mentality we will be hacked. We operate under the assumption that we're breached and we just haven't found it yet, or we have an insider threat and have not found them yet. We've gone from literally months from time to detect and allowing an adversary to dwell within our systems to less than 24 hours. In many cases, we've been able to find and detect things before federal law enforcement agencies have notified us that we're being hit from a known command and control network somewhere outside the United States. And the bottom one's very important because now we're telling everybody in the company that they're an extension of our team. So if they see something, say something, we've enabled them with tools to be able to report things very quickly. And they're much more aware that as an end user, no matter what department they're on, no matter if they're on an assembly line producing product, that they're also responsible for the information security posture of the company. All right, so quick background on how we got here, if the slides will go. So that didn't work out too well. This is kind of the typical security panel. You know, your CISOs are represented well here up on the panel. Why? Because they're no because. Everything is no because. I was walking across the street coming in earlier before lunch, and there was a group of people behind me, and they were using some pretty colorful language about their security team. Basically, those guys don't know what the hell they're doing. Our CISO's an ass, you know, those kind of things, because they constantly say no. And when it comes to cloud, it's definitely, oh, that worked, no cloud. So we took a different approach. Our team went first in the cloud for the entire company. So by leading the way, now what's your excuse? So if you're a business unit or an organization within the company, if information security can go do it and be compliant and be secure, then you have no more excuse, right? So I got my start several years ago with Amazon when I was working in the intelligence community as part of C2S. About 2013, 2014 timeframe, the CIO for the Central Intelligence Agency, Al Tarasik, not Jurassic, it's Tarasik, really looked at how the CIA by itself was spending just an unbelievable amount of money on IT. And as a customer, if I needed something, say a data set fell off the back of a truck somewhere downrange and I needed to be able to exploit that data set, it literally could take me a year to get an accredited system stood up. So that data is very timely and I need it. I can't wait a year, right? So about 2014, we started looking, and as you probably all well know by now, you know, they have a completely private Amazon Web Cloud for the intelligence community with many more agencies besides those, but those are the ones that I worked for initially in that initiative. So that was, for me, it was fantastic. It was a phenomenal time within the community because we were able to, you know, provide services and help the customer almost literally in real time. So about 2015, started looking for a career change, and you know, spoiler alert, that's where I'm at today. But this was important because I was meeting with the CIO of Commum at the time during the interview process, and the previous security regime, who's no longer with the company, there were basically that panel I showed you a minute ago. No cloud under any circumstance whatsoever. I just so happened to have a copy of this with me in my briefcase and slid the copy of paper over to her. And that started a whole different conversation because now we could go from a no because to a yes if. And now we have a cloud first policy for our entire organization when it comes to information technology. So kind of fast forward, doing really good the first couple of quarters last year. Had identified all the things that we needed to do. We had gone through the certification process to be eligible for AWS GovCloud. So that took a little bit of time because they have to vet you. You can't just, you know, walk in the door. You have to provide certification that you are who you say you are and you are a defense contractor. We're making just great strides in all sorts of stuff. And then Q3 happened. So Q3, heavily redacted, mainly to protect us. All the way over on the left, starting the very first part of July, we had two major incidents, both of them unrelated, human errors caused with the very sensitive systems. We were in the process of completing a migration effort for a company we acquired in 2014 that was still not complete. The company had really existed almost as a holding company, and we're still integrating and bringing everything in a centralized fashion, including the security stack. All of that failed. So when we had these breaches and we need to basically tell the folks with the badges and the guns that showed up what's going on, we turned to our systems that we thought were going to function under stress. They all failed, and they failed miserably. Now we've got, you know, multiple U.S. Government requests coming in, and during the course of all of this, we believed that we had a potential insider threat, and we had a suspected APT all at the same time. So as you can imagine, again, it was a very, very busy time period for us, Q3, Q4 of last year. So the green is good. So what happened is we said, all right, we can't trust our systems. We also, because the U.S. government is telling us we can't trust our admins because there could be some collusion between the two different groups with the human-related errors. We needed to turn something that we could spin up and put our capabilities in very rapidly and start to triage the problems that we had and start to provide answers, right? We needed to keep the business open. So we went first initially, if you kind of look in the middle, with a competitor solution and wasted a couple of days doing that, only to find out that you couldn't get a static IP address. And unfortunately, the tools that we needed to deploy required it. So then we pivoted quickly over to AWS, repeated everything. We were able to get it stood up in about 48 hours. Unfortunately, our MPLS Network Connect provider had given us a wrong IP address. It was still being used inside their network. And we literally had to tear everything down and rebuild it in 8 hours. So we took 2 days to build it, had to tear it down, rebuild it in 8 hours, and then we were functional. So from that point forward, we started to have a lot of winning. We were able to deploy endpoint agents to thousands of endpoints across the enterprise to look for signs of compromise. And we're starting to really drill down into forensics and start doing a lot of analytics in support of all the requests that were coming in. We'll talk about the bottom box here in just a minute. So at the end of all this, kept a multi-million-dollar site from potential mandated government closure. Didn't lose any data, no systems were compromised, and thankfully, there were no fines. So kind of fast forward, where are we at today? We like to call this white-hot winning. So remember that little box down on the bottom? So when all this was going on, we also had a problem with a customer with a particular platform that was downrange in theater that was experiencing some malfunction. The customer came back and said, hey, we're noticing some malfunctions in this particular piece of equipment. How many more of them are there out there? You know, what happened to it? You need to tell us, and you've got 2 weeks to do it. So that particular organization turned to my InfoSec team and said, please help us. We went and looked, and thankfully, we had accumulated a tremendous amount of data, event logs on who had accessed the system, modifications to the system, use of the system, all that. So there's a lot of data sitting there. As a matter of fact, 19 terabytes worth, about 6 billion events, but it was sitting in a proprietary format. And as we looked in our pipes to try to get it up into an S3 bucket to start looking at and provide some analytic capability, we realized it was going to take literally weeks to get it pushed through. So that little gray box, if you're familiar with the snowball, we ordered one of those and had it on site the next day. And it took about 26 hours to offload all 19 terabytes. 24 hours later, that thing was sitting, all that data was sitting up in an S3 bucket, and we were able to start putting our analytics magic against it. Had to reverse engineer that proprietary format. When we turned to the company that provided the storage, they basically said, you're screwed, we don't have a tool, we can't help you. We literally had to read with Windows Event Viewer 1 event at a time. Well, of course, 2 weeks, you're never going to make it. Thankfully, we were able to reverse engineer the code, provide a custom extract transform load, and then applying some analytics, got it down to about 2,700 events that we needed to pay attention to. Ultimately, it was 70 parts. Out of all of that was 70 parts. Customer said, wow, 70 parts, that's well within our accepted risk range. If something doesn't blow up, we'll just turn around and drop another one, right? So once we were in and we had this capability, this is the kind of stuff that we could do with it. Where are we at today? All of our advanced behavior analytics, both for insider threat and anything from the external sources that are attacking us, is all up in AWS GovCloud. Our SIM, we deployed this particular SIM. It was the first time it had been done in AWS GovCloud. Our enterprise compromise assessment tool, first time it had been done in AWS GovCloud. The vendors came back to us later and were asking us how we were able to do it, and I've just got a fantastic team, and they just hung with it until they could get it to work. We're collecting data across the enterprise. It's all getting shipped up into GovCloud. So we're meeting all sorts of security requirements from a compliance standpoint because the administrators that administer the systems do not have access to any of these systems. We're maintaining that separation. This one's kind of important because we're still working on this. So November of last year, if you have classified systems, classified programs, NISPOM came out with Conforming Change 2, and it requires you to have a very robust insider threat program. So they're basically looking for the next Snowden, to be honest. So we're able to do that. We're able to support our industrial security program with all this advanced analytics in the cloud, and it's paid off. I'll just leave you with that. It's fantastic what we can do. Plus, by putting some machine learning and everything against it, it takes us out of the picture, and we don't have those kind of problems that you would normally with people doing reviews of other people from an HR perspective. Also, we're running our open source intelligence program from the cloud. Not all of it from AWS GovCloud, because some of it, honestly, is pretty shady. So we're going out to other providers that have pretty lax requirements in other areas. We're able to go out on the dark web and other sources and look for any of our intellectual property that's for sale, our executives that are being targeted, and they have been, and also just generally what's going on and who's targeting the defense industrial base. But we're able to do that securely from the cloud. We build up our systems, we stay no longer than an hour, and we tear everything down and blow it away again. So this has also paid off huge dividends for us. In March, to give you an idea, I keep forgetting where I put my water. We were targeted by a foreign intelligence entity. The 0-day had come out, and they had hit us with a custom attack within 6 days after the 0-day hit. We were able to pick it up through our analytics program. Literally a day before, 2 federal agencies picked it up in their systems that were monitoring command and control nodes globally. We were able to allow them to continue to probe because we knew exactly what they were doing, to see what they were looking for, and we were able to capture all that information and provide very, very detailed analysis back to the U.S. federal government and law enforcement. We were protected, ultimately we protected that entire program globally, and there was no loss of data, and we received some really nice kudos from U.S. federal government on that one. All right, so kind of back to that, you think of our InfoSec rules. Number 4 is really kind of changed now because we're in the cloud. We can try everything. We can do it very quickly. We don't have to wait for stuff to arrive. We don't have to wait for our infrastructure and operations team to spin up services for us and wait months, to do that because they've got lots of other stuff and it's basically take a ticket, get in line. And we try everything. So we basically treat, and it's been probably, said many times, none of our capabilities are pets anymore. And that's one of the big problems with IT today is, they think of all their systems as pets. All of our stuff in the cloud is cattle. We consume it. And if the cow acts up, we shoot it in the head and we get another cow. So sorry for the horrible dark analogy, but that's really it. So at the end of all this too, I keep hearing Han Solo in the back of my head telling me, great kid, don't get cocky. We could get owned tomorrow for something, like the attack that's going on today. But we're able to respond much quicker. I mean, literally within 24 hours, and that up until, recently was almost unheard of. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for some questions. We want to talk about more of our compliance part of that whole journey.
Yep.
So we'll go back one. So
I think we wanted to have a Q&A now on really what are some of the things that you guys are seeing in the DFARS or 171 that you believe are challenges. Because the other piece that we've been working with this team is really getting them fully documented and fully compliant with. How many sites are we working on with you guys?
I mean, VPCs or how many sites?
No, I mean your different sites across the country.
It's in the
We have,
team.
I think, 15.
Yeah,
Okay.
15 major sites.
So we're learning a lot of lessons by going through this with this team, and we wanted to get feedback or questions of what you guys are seeing in your environments and trying to document for 171. So within AWS, obviously, you have the ability to do 2 different types of, two-factor authentication. You can use a virtual token through like a Google Authenticator, or you can use a Gemalto token, which is actually, depending on how you're set up, the preferred way would be to use a Gemalto token, especially on root, because of the transitory nature of a, Google Authenticator on an iPhone.
That's not a GovCloud, right?
No, you've got, what is the name, what's one?
So we have
SafeNet tokens are in GovCloud.
Well, what about all the things inside GovCloud? So that's fine for the AWS console API keys. That doesn't necessarily apply SSH into instances, RDP into instances. That still doesn't work with two-factor authentication.
Yeah, you should still be able to put two-factor authentication on your APIs because you can actually force multi-factor authentication on your APIs as well.
Okay, what about SSH and RDP access?
In the same, but the other thing too is, and part of one of the partners that we've leveraged, the other piece there is then also to use something like an Okta, which has, integration with multiple different vendors and so forth from that standpoint. And so you could have, Yubico key or whatever the case may be, to be able to do that. Does that answer?
Except one clarification. SSH, not SSH, SurePass ID. It's the tokens that we use in GovCloud. So you can actually go to Amazon.com and type in MFA
Yes.
When you, it's last month, Microsoft announced they would be DFARS compliant, to be by the end of the year. Is Amazon currently DFARS compliant?
Well, and yeah, that's always the fun one. It's kind of like being CJIS compliant. There's no such thing as an independent third-party compliance of either DFARS or CJIS, but unfortunately, we do have, other organizations that claim things such as that. What really is the backstop for both of us is going to be our FedRAMP. And so you've got your FedRAMP authority to operate both at the moderate and high and GovCloud, and that's really the backstop for DFARS or 171 because it's really a self-assessment. It's not something that you can hire a Kratos or something like that to come in and do a third-party assessment like you do on FedRAMP. So that statement can be a little bit misleading, but really if you read in the fine print, it's really the FedRAMP is what the certification that's standing behind the 171 certification. Yes.
And what was the, sorry,
Move inspector to GovCloud.
inspector to GovCloud?
Yeah, it's more than like, there's a lot of things that are on the roadmap. What's really happens with moving things into GovCloud or different regions is customer demand. And so obviously, we do have a high demand for services like that, and they continually move new services into GovCloud. But the other side, we don't necessarily disclose roadmap, but it is something that you can either, directly work with me or directly work with your account manager, and we can do a request for feature within the environment. And that's usually what the demand gen of request for features in GovCloud is what prioritize those types of services to get into the environment. So, any other questions or any other battle wounds from 171? Oh, yes, sir.
So you gave one good example of an IAM control that you put in place for cloud trails to meet the specific 171. Are there more examples of those in various locations in the Amazon ecosystem?
Yeah, so what we did is I mentioned, and I apologize, I thought I had actually the link to the RPM tool that we worked on with Allgrass. So we went through and personally mapped 71 of the 171 controls to services within AWS, whether it's EBS, S3, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, IAM, and so forth. And the tool's a free-facing tool, so it's where's Jeff? What's the URL? It's like www.rpm.allgrass.com, I believe, but I'll give you a card, and it's a free-facing tool to customers and partners. And so you can go in there, not only you can see the 18 controls that you can inherit off of AWS, but then there's 71 plus or minus, I don't know the exact number, but I think it was pretty close to 71 controls that AWS services and solutions can treat within 171. And then we have at least 6 partners that are mapped in there that, anywhere are able to treat anywhere from, 20, to 40 to 41 different controls. I think like CIS benchmarks, like if you use the Amazon machine images that are from CIS benchmarks, I think there's 23 controls that you can actually, treat just by leveraging those hardened images and so forth. And so get with me, I'll give you a card, make sure you got the URL. And they're actually on the show floor. You can actually even go get a demo live if you get onto the show floor. Yes, sir.
Doesn't the DFARS clause require compliance with 171 for usage of a FedRAMP moderate cloud?
Right.
So why do we need to map? So if they're using AWS FedRAMP moderate services, why do they have to map to the 171?
Because then it's the customer responsibility for the controls that are above the hypervisor. So yeah, the infrastructure is certified under FedRAMP, but that's the AWS infrastructure. But when you start deploying systems and services within your customer account, like you're deploying an operating system using EC2 or you're standing up an EBS volume, you have to go through and document how you're treating the risks associated with those customer solutions in the environment. Because the great thing about AWS is a lot of the services are available for you to configure the way you want them, and there's different ways to treat them from a security approach, but it is up to you to treat them in accordance to the 171 controls for those above the hypervisor control sets that you need to meet. Yes, sir. Right.
Yeah. But it does say something about protecting CUI, so in section, yeah.
So for COVID, you actually do work for the government that requires the maintenance of CUI in your system. Don't you have to meet 800-53?
That's where FedRAMP comes in. So as long as those systems and they have all that on the back end, we're still only responsible for 171. We don't, so 53 is for any organization that's providing services back to the federal government. So that's really intended, again, because it's supposed to be federal, and this is just our systems. We don't provide IT services back to the federal government. Yeah. But yeah, CUI applies across the board, and so that was kind of an interesting challenge last year when all of that started to come out, and then we realized, well, if we put CUI in the cloud, then it has to be FedRAMP moderate at a minimum, and then we had to understand what the impact levels were and how DoD was classifying it, because not all CUI is treated equally. There are other cloud service providers out there that only have impact level 2, and so the simple question we give our internal customers, the people in our business, if they want to spin up a new service or something and looking at the cloud, it's simple, kind of a binary yes or no. Is the information publicly releasable? If it is, then it's impact level 2. If it's not, it's impact level 4, and it needs to go over into FedRAMP moderate. So that's really the way we treat that. It's a pretty easy, I guess, litmus test would be a good analogy. A good question.
So question for you concerning mobile apps that will access or connect to a cloud service. Where, based on your recommendation or interpretation, does 171 pertaining to the design and evaluation of that mobile app, if any content that CUI is going to persist, be stored, or be transmitted back and forth to the CSP, and where would IAP protection protocols there fit into the determination of suitability?
Yeah, so, great, there's multiple questions in that. So I'll give you multiple answers. So in the mobile app, if you look at the identity and the access management control sets, there's some treatments around mobile technology, but it's really a blanket statement of you must treat mobile technologies or interfaces. My recommendation is then to go back and look at the identity and access management controls and give the deeper treatment statements from an 853 standpoint. But the reality is that you look at what are those treatments, and then, because ultimately any of the mobile app interconnections are going to be a customer responsibility. But what I would do is balance the ones that are in identity and access management, as well as system communication and system integrity, because there's also some other communication elements in there. And so really it comes down to, do you have an MDM solution that you can, that you're leveraging with mobile interconnections? How are you encrypting, point to point, whether it's internal of your cloud security or your AWS, account, with, customer account? And then how are you doing, data at rest or encryption, especially if there's any kind of CUI, interactions with those devices and so forth. And I think that's the key, is making sure that you're really doing more screen scrapes rather than, having data transit to a mobile application. So there's actually a lot of design elements that you probably need to look at, but the issue with 171 is the control statement is just very basic. You must treat mobile code or mobile services. So, my recommendation is to take a deeper dive of what are those same controls that map back in 853, and then that would be the treatment that I would put in place.
One just quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like 863-3 and the correlation of identity verification through to authentication, for CUI systems, you're needing a LOA3 level cert, which would be a CAC-based derived credential, and or biometric for hard token at LOA4. So how, in that kind of exchange, is Amazon kind of picking up the exchange of the verifications through to the backend system?
So you can set up a PIV or CAC, integration with AWS, as well as you can also use third-party solutions like an Okta or some of those single sign-on or federated IDs, or you can federate back to your on-prem solution. So there's multiple different ways to set up those identification and accreditation elements that you need to do, leveraging the different tool sets that interact with AWS. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing. We're being blinded up here by these lights. We're going to do some reverse engineering, turn the lights back on you guys. Any other questions or comments or? So I've got a question to the audience, and you know, because what we're seeing a big uptick in 171, you know, communication. I mean, how many people are really working on this today or planning to work on it? So, are you working on it, or are you planning to work on it? So, all right. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing in you know, meeting the intent of the control framework? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a true statement. So, anybody else? Instrumentation and clients, just having, you know, defining boundaries and so forth. Yeah, so, you know, if you guys, you know, I think that's all I really had, unless either one of you had anything.
I was going to ask some math questions next.
You're going to ask math
no,
questions?
I'm not
All right,
gonna
I'm
ask
out of here.
math questions.
All right, well, I appreciate, oh, yes, sir.
When you get an incident, what should the customer expect to get from the CSP and maybe the other person who's providing shared services? Detailed information and how long?
Yeah, and like I said, incident response is one of those tricky subjects because it's, you know, is it an incident in your customer account? You know, that's something that you have a misconfiguration in the environment, you know, you have a port wide open, you know, whatever the case may be. Because we don't necessarily go into a customer account, we're only seeing boundary information. I mean, one of the examples is a few years ago, you know, we do scan for, you know, public-private keys that are out on the internet for AWS accounts, and we had an analyst that actually mistakenly published their private keys up on his AWS webpage, and so we were identified that, notified them, said, hey, you know, you probably want to keep this stuff, you know, in a safer environment. And so, you know, that was one incident where it was like, okay, it was clear that the customer made a mistake, and we identified it and worked with them. But others are, you know, if it's a DDoS or it's something that's a mass broad scale, and obviously that's going to impact multiple customers, then we do, you know, customer notifications, and we work with those individual customers and give them the information that they need. But I think, you know, high and large, more often than not, it's a customer-specific incident. And, you know, we obviously are there and we have resources, even if a customer, because we'll get reports from other customers. Maybe your account's DDoSing another customer, or somebody out on the internet will get, you know, support tickets that'll say, hey, I'm being DDoSed from this IP address, and we'll find out that a customer's been breached. And so we'll work with that customer, you know, get them to, you know, shut down the ports and protocols and so forth and respond. But more often than not, it's specific to the incident. And then once it's confirmed, if it's a customer-specific incident, then that's where the 72-hour, you know, notification on the customer's behalf goes into play, not necessarily the cloud service provider. So does that give you? I know it you know, at the end of the day, it's a tough. It's situational. It's one of those, I hate to say it, but it depends. It's really what it comes down to. But we are here to support the customers in any event, but more often than not, we see it's a customer misconfiguration that we're helping the customer remediate. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, I'd like to appreciate your time today, Robert and Lori. Thank you for coming down and giving us some insights on how you guys are, you know, attacking that dark web, as you call it.
Yeah, yeah. And if anybody wants to talk out in the hall, we'll be more than happy to hang out there for a little bit.
All right.
So, thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, everybody.